Um, I just got back from my dog walk where I was talking about do you feel, how do you feel on Dan Blazarian's actions? I don't necessarily think he was right or wrong. I totally understood where he was coming from in wanting to go get a gun. And I totally understood where Bristol Palin's husband, a decorated Navy SEAL, was coming from and saying, well, you didn't have a gun, so you should have helped in another way. The other thing that I'm finding, and I hate to use the word interesting in a situation like this, but I guess it's almost troubling, okay? The world we live in today is such a, it's like such a crazy world, crazy place, crazy times, and what I see a lot of happening lately is like conspiracy theories coming out of things, and I think, at least in my opinion, not a fact, I'm not saying it's a fact, I'm not saying this is what happened, but in my opinion, a lot of this, I think, stems from or started with 9/11 and all of the different theories that came out of what happened there, all the way from the original, everyone's original thought of this was a terrorist act, and it was one way or another, either way it was a terrorist act. Same way what happened in Las Vegas, like they're saying like it wasn't necessarily linked to terror. Like what they're talking about is like actual terrorist organizations such as like ISIS and organizations like that are actually like a known terrorist organization. Like obviously what happened was a terrorist act one way or another, whether it was a civilian terrorist act or perpetrated by an organization. But because of what happened with 9/11 and it coming from like all the way from this was a terrorist act to it was Inside Job and the Sphere and the No Planes, and it was a gold heist, and it was a weather weapon, or maybe not a weather weapon, that's more coming from like the hurricanes, but that's what I'm saying, like this is what happens. It was some type of new weapon trial thing, and ever since then, every time there is an instance of this type of mass violence perpetrated in our country, immediately like people go all the way to like with this, like what happened in Las Vegas, like we're already like people are already like on YouTube and like Instagram talking about this MK Ultra mind control, and like with the hurricanes we had, was this a weather weapon being tested, and like these theories of, and I hate to call them all conspiracy theories, but that's, I guess, the terminology like that's being used, is that these are like conspiracy theories because we can't, prove or disprove any of it. I might be wrong about that, but I mean, I'm just like, I'm a normal person. Like, don't quote me and say like fucking, oh, he said this and that. Like, that's not what it is. It's like I might not just be not using the right terminology. But yeah, like what just happened in Las Vegas, like we've heard from the shooter, the alleged shooter, whatever, his brother saying he wasn't even like that, and now like today we've heard from somebody who was his neighbor for I think like a 9-month period of time in Nevada, And he also said, like, no, this person wouldn't do that. I can't see it. So now we have basically like a JFK thing going on where, you know, it's all the way already made this circle of, you know, what really happened. Is this a false flag attack? Is it this? Is it that? And, you know, people are saying, like, we want to see video of this guy going into Mandalay Bay. We want to know how the fuck he got all these weapons in there. Now, here's the thing, like, as a person who has a home in Nevada, I can tell you, I personally don't think it would have been hard to get all those weapons in there. People are talking about metal detectors and this and that, but realistically, like, when you go into a major hotel and casino, if you're checking in with baggage, you're really not subject to a lot of scrutiny as to what you have, and that will probably change. But you're really not subject to that type of scrutiny as to what's in your luggage. You know, it's just kind of take it for granted that it's your luggage. I personally believe that someone could fairly easily, and I'm not saying super easily, but fairly easily get into, you know, Mandalay Bay with that amount of firepower, given the fact that he checked in, you know, 2 or 3 days prior to the incident, and the incident happening on the last day of the concert. He could have been, you know, taking weapons up there for, you know, days, you know, 2 or 3 days, you know, weapons and ammunition. So, you know, yeah, I think you could probably do that fairly easily over that period of time. Because when you're staying, you know, when you've already checked in and you're staying, first of all, like I said, like, you're not really, you know, subject to being scrutinized as to what's in your luggage. And if you're already checked in, like, you're really not subject to any scrutinization as to what you take up to your room after the fact. You know, if you have a room key, basically, like in Las Vegas, if you're not familiar, there's usually like a security guard posted at the elevator so that people that are just downstairs gambling can't go up into the sections of the hotels that are the rooms and such. You have to have a room key. But if you do, you know, have that room key, you're allowed to, you know, pass through and get on the elevator, you know, fairly easily. And I'm only making that point because from what I heard, it sounded like some type of 7.65 or 7.6. Anyway, like basically like an AK-47 round. I can't remember exactly what size round that is, but sounded like an AK-47 round. 7.26, I think it is, and it could have either been belt fed. You know, they're doing this too. Like, was that a belt fed weapon? Now, when you say that, that's a whole nother topic of debate, because, like, you know, that could mean a whole lot of things. A belt-fed weapon, now, do you mean like an actual chain of ammunition coming from the side, or it could have been a, you know, 50 or 100 round drum magazine? A lot of different things that these weapons could have been. And they also said that they found more than one weapon in this gentleman's room. I think it was like 8 or 10 weapons up there. And then on one of the YouTube news channels, one of the people that reports on this type of stuff, I feel like made the mistake between suppressor and silencer in saying, you know, would it have been worse if this weapon was silenced? And he said, you know, I fired a weapon with a silencer, it still sounds like a jackhammer. And no, you fired a weapon with a suppressor. A weapon with a silencer is fairly silent. It quiets the like there's two parts of a gunshot, like your boom effect and your like echoing slamming effect, and it silences one of the two. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to try to tell you which one it was, but you also have experts, and I say experts in terms of like people in the military that have been to Afghanistan and heard these type of weapons being fired against them numerous times, saying that it's also weird that we didn't see muzzle flashes in the videos, because that particular weapon and round would be making large muzzle flashes, whether it had a silencer suppressor or not, especially in the nighttime. So we also have that going on, like that debate. It's basically, coming down to, because of the crazy world that we live in, we're coming across another, like a whole nother JFK grassy knoll situation. Like, it's 50-50 right now, basically. Like, you have people saying that this guy, that the alleged perpetrator was a scapegoat, and there's actually a couple of people coming, kind of not necessarily to his defense, but saying, he really wasn't that type of person, and they don't see that he would have done that. And you have other people that are, obviously, thinking, yeah, if some crazy fucking guy did this shit. I don't have an opinion. I do not have an opinion. I wasn't there. I'm just trying to lay out the facts that I've been hearing throughout yesterday and today. It is interesting to hear people that I believe qualified to say the things they're saying, in terms of, if it was the weapon that they say it is, there would have been more muzzle flashes, and I kind of agree with that. And then you also have people saying there was more than one gunman, someone on the 4th floor, someone at ground level. It's just all over the place. And that is, kind of the point of this is, like, that's what happens in these situations now. Because of the world we live in and the crazy events that we're subject to, when something of this magnitude happens, all kinds of theories surface. And we never really get to hear the truth. The one thing that I heard that I did agree with is, you definitely cannot just take the media's word for that being exactly what happened. Now, in terms of, was this a tragic event? Absolutely. Was it an act of terrorism? In my opinion, yes. Whether it was perpetrated by a terror group or not, like, this was a fucking act of terrorism. We have almost 60, if not 60 or more Americans who have died. I don't even know if they've gotten a full count yet, or if that has to do with people who were taken to the hospital in critical condition passing since they've been there. Anyway, we have in excess of, in the high 50s, people that have lost their lives, and over 500 more that were injured. So yeah, this is definitely an act of terrorism, one way or another. Like, and really, at the end of the day, no matter what, like, whether it's false flag, whether he was a scapegoat, whether he was the one that did it, if that many people died and that many people were hurt, like, it was an act of terrorism, even if it comes down to the craziest theories being right, that it was our own government again, you know what I mean? Then that was an act of terrorism perpetrated against us by our own government. And I'm just saying if. I'm not saying it was. I'm saying if. But I definitely think it was an act of terrorism. It's just interesting how many different stories come out. It almost feels like it gets to a point where it's in order to confuse. We even have, like, I even saw one thing about, like, do we have these some type of actors, like, involved, like these disaster actors or whatever. So at the end of the day, like, it was an awful event, and definitely a terror attack one way or another. Again, my heart goes out to the families who were hit by this. Just interesting, man, the world that we live in and the things that come out when an event of this magnitude is perpetrated against our country these days. And then we never really get the whole truth, which is too bad.